Officially, the North Spire Loop has been closed for maintenance for 3 years. The sign is simple: trail closed, danger, do not enter. None of the rangers will look you in the eyes when you ask why. They'll mumble something about unstable rocks, washouts, liability. One of them will probably mention bear activity because bears is an easy word. Everybody understands bears. What they won't tell you is that on the last weekend that trail was open, 5 hikers went in, and only 1 came out. They weren't idiots, and that's important to know. This isn't a story about drunk teenagers breaking into an abandoned asylum. These were normal people, the kind of people you probably have on your Instagram feed. There was Mia, 27, the planner, the one with laminated trail map, backup power bank, and emergency whistle, already tested in the parking lot. Logan, her boyfriend, Jim Strong, but new to real mountains. He was mostly there to take photos of Mia standing on cliffs. Also Jules, Mia's best friend, quiet, sarcastic, and just outdoorsy enough to pretend she wasn't anxious about every rustle in the underbrush. Also Dev, the guy with the camera. There's always one. He had a new action cam strapped to his chest, already imagining the edit. Drone shot, cut to laughing faces, then a beat drop over a slow pan of sunset on the ridge. And Aaron, Mia's cousin, ex-military, now back in school, the one everyone half-secretly assumed would be the responsible one if things went sideways. They arrived late in the afternoon, gravel crunching under worn tires, helped themselves to a spot near the trailhead, and stepped out into that high country air that somehow makes you feel like your lungs are brand new. At first, it was just another weekend adventure. On the bulletin board at the trailhead, under the usual sun-faded posters, "Leave no trace, know before you go, bear safety," someone had thumbtacked a new sheet of paper. Not official, no logo, just bold marker on printer paper. "Do not camp above the tree line. They move in the open." Jules pointed at it, eyebrows up. Okay, that's creepy. Mia laughed, unbothered. Probably some weirdo's idea of a joke. Logan took a picture of it. "I'm tagging this local cryptid warning." Dev panned his camera over it, chuckling. "Cold open for the vlog. I love it." Only Aaron seemed unsettled. He studied the handwriting, the tremor in the letters where the marker had pressed too hard. Not artfully messy. Desperate messy. But he shrugged it off when Mia asked, "You good?" "Yeah," he said. "Just thinking about the weather." He pointed to the clouds stacking up like dirty cotton along the spine of the range. "Don't want to get caught in a storm." They signed the trail register, just names on a clipboard, like signing in at the gym, and started up the trail. You know how it is at the beginning of a hike. The trail feels like a promise. Everyone's still joking, backpacks feel light, and nobody's thinking about how far they have to come back. That's the thing about trails. They never look dangerous at the start. The North Spire Trail climbed steadily through dense fir and pine, the forest dipping alternatively into golden light and sudden pockets of cool shadow. Birds chattered above them. Somewhere far off, water shrugged over rocks. An hour in, Logan called out, "Guys, check this out." He stepped off the main path into a patch of exposed soil where the ground sloped down to a dry creek bed. There, sunk into the earth, was a depression nearly as wide as Logan was tall. It looked like a crater. The edges crumbled and collapsed where he prodded with his boot. Mia frowned. "Is that from a falling tree?" "No trunk," Aaron said, scanning the woods. Dev crouched, filming, running one hand over the footprint shape. "Okay, I know this is dumb, but it kinda looks like toes?" He wasn't wrong. The front end of the crater had 5 rounded protrusions, each as big as a duffel bag. Not sharp, no claw marks, just blunt impressions, as if something enormous and soft had pressed down. Jules shivered. "Can we not? My brain is already imagining a titan stomping through here." "Relax," Mia said, though she was measuring the depression with her eyes. "It's just erosion. Maybe a sinkhole collapsed weird." "Giants?" Logan said, grinning for the camera. "Confirmed." Dev grinned back. "Hit like and subscribe for more cursed hikes." They moved on. The forest closed around them again, swallowing the strange mark. That's another thing about trails. If you keep walking forward, the weirdness behind you can feel like it never happened. At least until the next one. By early evening, they broke out above the tree line. The world suddenly opened. No more close-knit trunks or safety of branches. Just bare rock, a low scrub clinging in cracks, and the wide sweep of sky pouring light over jagged peaks. "Whoa," Logan breathed, putting his hands on his hips, chest heaving. Okay, this was worth it. Dev turned in a slow circle, camera catching it all. "This is insane." They could see the North Spire itself now, a crooked fang of stone knifing up from the ridge, catching the last gold of the sun. "Camp just below that?" Mia suggested, "so we can hit the summit at sunrise?" Aaron squinted at the clouds. They'd thickened, dragging purple shadows across the valley. The air had a dry, metallic smell, like static waiting for a spark. "We should stay lower," he said. "Storm's building." Mia hesitated. The view up here was everything she'd wanted. The photos, the stories, the feeling of being high above the world like the people in the travel blogs she followed. "We'll be fine," she said. "If it looks worse, we'll come down." They found a flat stretch of rock near a jumble of boulders, just enough scrub to anchor their tents. By the time they had their little nylon homes pitched, the sun was sliding behind the far peaks, smearing red and orange along the serrated horizon. And that's when the ground moved. Very softly at first, a low, almost inaudible tremor that made Jules look up from her stove in confusion. "Did you feel that?" "Earthquake?" Dev said. Aaron knelt down, palm pressed to the rock. The vibration thudded up through his arm like a distant drumbeat. Boom, boom, boom. Too slow, too spaced out for a quake. It felt intentional, like footsteps, far away but heavy as sin. "Probably just rockfall," Logan said, but his voice had lost some of its easy swagger. "Rockfall doesn't happen in beats," Jules murmured. The tremors faded after a minute, sliding back into stillness. The ridge was silent again, save for the whisper of wind. Mia forced a smile. "Okay, that was weird, but everything up here is weird, right? We're at she checked her GPS watch. 9,000 feet. The mountain's just doing mountain things." Nobody wanted to argue hard enough to be the one who ruined the night, so they let it go. They cooked freeze-dried meals. Dev filmed a shaky camp update, where Logan flexed to show he wasn't cold and Jules made faces behind him. The stars came out, fierce and close, the Milky Way a white scar across the sky. And while they laughed and ate, something stood very still among the dark shapes of the far peaks and watched the tiny dots of their headlamps move around. It was Aaron who woke first. No noise startled him, no nightmare. Just that old military instinct that something was off. The night outside the tent was strange. Too bright and too dark at the same time. The moon had risen, swollen and yellow, laying a dark sheet of light over the ridge. The wind had died completely. No rustle, no sigh, as if the world had taken a breath and refused to let it out. He crawled out of the tent and stood, listening. Boom. He felt it more than he heard it. A thud somewhere deep underfoot. Boom. The second one was closer. Rocks clicked against each other, a pebble skittering down a slope. Aaron? Mia's voice came out sleepily from the tent. You okay? He debated lying, choosing the easy answer. Yeah, just gotta use the bathroom. Romantic, Jules mumbled from her tent. He grabbed his headlamp anyway and walked away a bit. Not because he needed to, but because being inside thin nylon when the world felt wrong made his skin crawl. He angled the beam away from the camp over the ridge. At first, he thought he was looking at a shadow. On the face of the opposite slope where the moonlight painted everything in shades of bone and charcoal, there was a shape darker than the rest. Fingers, his brain supplied, before he could stop it. 4 long blotches, each as wide as a car, arcing together in the suggestion of a curve. His light trembled, the beam shaking as he moved. The dark wasn't just darker, it was deeper. A hollow pressed into the mountain itself, as if something enormous had rested its hand there, fingers curled up over the ridge. The palm of the depression was the size of a small house. Aaron's mouth went dry. He turned, swallowing hard. Guys, you might want to see this. There was grumbling from the tents, but one by one they emerged, wrapped in jackets, faces crumpled with sleep. He didn't say anything. He just pointed. As their beams followed his, the mood shifted. No more joking. No easy, wow, that's wild. Jules gave a soft, involuntary whimper. Dev whispered, That's not erosion. Logan swallowed audibly. It's some kind of geological formation. Has to be. Mia just stared. Her brain was trying to catalog it, categorize it, file it away as known phenomenon. It refused. The scale was wrong. The shape was wrong. It was too deliberate. The ground shivered again. A slow, pulsing tremor. Boom. This time it came from behind them. All 4 headlamps snapped around. Up in the skyline toward the jagged silhouette of the north spire, something was moving. Not fast, not dramatic, just rising. At first it looked like another ridge shifting against the stars, rock sliding off rock. Then their eyes adjusted, and the shape defined itself. A shoulder rounding out of the mountain's line, a slope of something that might have been a skull. No face they could see, just absence, black against the sky, swallowing starlight. It was enormous. Not big like a truck, big like a piece of the world that had decided to stand up. The sound of stone grinding on stone rolled down the slope like distant thunder. Inside now, Aaron snapped, every nerve in his body turning to ice. He didn't have time to say it twice. They dove for the tents, but instinct kicked in for all of them at once. Tents were thin. Tents were bright. Tents were bad. Screw it, Mia hissed. Grab your boots and get to the rocks. They yanked on footwear with shaking hands and grabbed whatever was closest. Headlamps, Dev's camera still strapped to his chest, Mia's pack, and sprinted for the jumbled of half-buried boulders upslope from their camp. Behind them, the boom of those impossible steps grew louder. Boom, boom, boom. It felt like being inside a drum. The rock under their palms vibrated as they scrambled between 2 wedged boulders into a narrow crevice, hearts hammering up into their throats. "Lights," Aaron whispered sharply. "Off, now." The world snapped into near darkness, only the dim smear of the moon above slicing the crevice in silver. They huddled there, pressed together, breathing through open mouths, trying not to wheeze. And then the giant reached the ridge. They heard it first, the slow drag of something massive over stone, the crack and tumble of loosened rocks bouncing downhill. Then a shadow fell over their hiding spot, a darkness deeper than any cloud. The strip of moon above them vanished, replaced by a flat nothing. Dev made a small choking sound. Aaron clamped a hand over his mouth. Something lowered itself near the boulders, the air pressure changing, making their ears pop. The smell hit them next, dry, ancient, like dust from a tomb in cold iron. Through a crack in the rock near their knees, Mia could see a sliver of the ridge. A line of flesh? Stone? It was impossible to tell. The surface was rough like weathered rock, but it moved with the subtle, terrible inertia of something alive. A curve that might have been a wrist, the back of a hand settling on the ground nearby. Fingers as thick as tree trunks splaying out. The whole mountain seemed to sigh under its weight. The giant stopped. The silence that followed was not empty. It was listening. They felt it in their bones, that sense of being measured. Not seen exactly. The thing's head was still higher than their hiding place, but felt. Their tiny heat, their tiny heartbeats, intrusions crawling in on its realm. A finger shifted, dragging along the ground with a noise like distant avalanches. The tip of it passed within a few feet of their crevice, blocking the crack completely for a heartbeat. Jules's teeth chattered slightly against her lip. She squeezed her eyes shut and tried not to imagine the same finger curling inward, pinching the rocks together. The finger moved on. A few seconds later, the hand lifted, pebbles rattling down on them in little cascades. The pressure lightened as the shadow drew back. Boom. The next step was further away. Boom. Another heading down the slope. The giant was moving past them, out onto the open ridge where the little cluster of tents glowed faintly under the moon like bright mushrooms. Mia, against all her survival instincts, angled herself just enough to see through another crack. The giant leaned down. The angle of it made no sense. Her brain kept insisting she was watching bad special effects, that nothing that big could move like that without collapsing under its own weight. But there it was, a suggestion of a head turning, a neck that might have been a column of stacked boulders. No eyes that she could make out, but it looked. The tents shook as the creature's shadow rolled over them. It reached down. There was no roar, no dramatic stomp. It simply pinched the nearest tent between two fingers and lifted. The nylon crumpled and split like tissue. The sleeping bag inside dangled for a moment before sliding out, flopping limply hundreds of feet to smash on the rocks below. Logan's sleeping bag. Mia's breath shattered in her chest. She didn't hear herself say his name in a broken, airless whisper, but the others did. The giant held the ragged scrap of a tent up near where its face should be, as if sniffing it, then tossed it aside casually. The wreckage fluttered away into the darkness like shed skin. It moved to the next. In under 30 seconds, their entire camp was gone. Tents crushed, gear scattered, the careful little arrangement of their little human life obliterated by fingers the size of pillars. The giant seemed almost puzzled by the findings, turning them over, pinching them, letting them drop. Finally, apparently satisfied that nothing in the cluster was worth keeping, it straightened. Mia felt the air shift as its attention drifted away. The shadow slipped off their crevice as it turned toward the far edge of the ridge. 3 more thunderous steps, and it vanished back into the broken line of peaks, dissolving into jagged silhouettes in darkness, as if it had never been separate from the mountain at all. Only then did anyone breathe out properly. They stayed frozen for a long, long time. Eventually, Aaron forced himself to speak. "We have to move. There might be more." "Logan," Mia croaked. Her voice cracked open something. Grief, shock, panic. It all crashed over them at once. "Mia," Aaron said as gently as he could in a whisper. "He wasn't in the tent. He was with us when we ran, remember? He stopped. They all did the same mental roll call. Mia, Aaron, Jules, Dev. No, Logan. He was behind me," Dev said, his voice rising. "When we ran, I swear he was right behind me." Jules shook her head, tears glinting in the silver of moonlight. "I thought he was already here. I didn't count." They hadn't. Nobody had. In that mad scramble, they just assumed everyone had made it. Aaron's jaw clenched. "We can't help him from here. First priority is getting off this ridge alive, or we're all just more bodies they'll find later. Understood?" It was brutal. It was cold. It was the only thing keeping him from breaking. They eased out of the crevice, limbs stiff, hearts still pounding. The camp was a flattened mess. Their tents were shredded plastic and twisted poles. Sleeping bags burst open like gutted animals, synthetic fill drifting in the air. Logan's pack lay crushed under a rock the size of a car, one strap sticking out. Mia moved toward it on autopilot, but Aaron caught her arm. "Don't," he said. "It's too exposed up here. We're going back down to the tree line. We'll circle back lower, call for help as soon as we have a signal." Dev tapped his phone. No bars. No surprise. "The main trail?" Jules asked. Aaron shook his head. "You saw those steps. Whatever that thing is, it's walking the open ridge. We drop down the side, cut across the valley, pick up the main path lower down." "That's not on the map," Mia said, even as she shouldered her half-crushed pack anyway. Her brain clung to labeled lines of paper. Stepping off of them felt like stepping into nowhere. "Neither are giants," Aaron said. "Stay close. No lights unless absolutely necessary. If you hear or feel anything, stop. Do not run unless I say so. Got it?" They nodded. The descent began. Moving down a steep, rocky slope in the dark is a special kind of hell. Loose stones skittered underfoot, threatening to send them tumbling. Scrub tore at their legs. Every gust of icy air felt like the cold breath of something enormous leaning close. They picked their way back down, half sliding, half crab walking, fingers numb where they clutched the rock. After 20 minutes that felt like hours, a line of twisted, wind-stunted pines appeared below them, black against the rock like skeletal fingers reaching up. "Thank God," Jules whispered. "Cover." They plunged into the sparse forest, grateful for the way the branches broke up the sky, making them feel smaller, less visible, less edible. The tremors started again. Boom. 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 Not as close as before, but not far enough for comfort. Somewhere above them, another, or the same, giant was patrolling the ridge. "Keep going," Aaron murmured. "We want distance, not height." They moved faster now, stumbling through undergrowth. Branches whipped their faces, needles scraped their arms. Dev, still wearing the chest-mounted camera, caught glimpses of their wild-eyed faces in the bouncing reflections of his own headlamp on rock. though the headlamp itself stayed off. Little shards of terrified humanity in the middle of a nightmare. "Guys," he whispered hoarsely after a while. "I think we're angling too far north. The main trail runs south along the..." A sound cut him off. Not a boom this time. Something much closer. A grinding creak like trees protesting in high wind. Except there was no wind. They slowed. The forest around them groaned again, a deep, resonant noise. Mia lifted her eyes, heart slamming against her ribs. At first, she thought she was looking at two closely spaced tree trunks ahead, parallel to each other. Thick, pale in the moonlight filtering through the canopy. Then, one of them shifted. It wasn't trees. They were standing between legs. The realization hit them all at once, a sickening lurch in the stomach. They had walked directly between the ankles of something that was standing perfectly still, its upper half hidden in the canopy of darkness. "Don't move," Aaron breathed. Every muscle in Mia's body screamed to run, but she froze, teeth chattering as she stared at the vast, rough column of whatever it was beside her. It was like standing next to a stone monolith that was pretending to be a statue and failing. The leg flexed just slightly. Bits of bark and rock flaked off, pattering to the ground around their feet. Above them, leaves shivered in a gust of air from something exhaling. The giant hadn't noticed them. Not yet. It was waiting, listening like the first one had. And then, off to their left, far enough they couldn't see the source, but close enough that the sound knifed through the trees very clearly. Something screamed. Human, male, raw with terror. The scream cut off with a crunch that vibrated through the trunks around them. Mia's vision tunneled. Logan. The giant turned toward the sound. They felt the motion before they saw it. The leg beside them shifted, lifting. It was stepping away. As the titanic foot swept forward, the ground rolled under them like a wave. Mia dropped to her knees. Dev slammed into a tree. Jules bit down on a cry as a branch whipped her face. The giant took another step, trees cracking under its weight like matchsticks. The canopy above them tore and swayed. The thing moved toward where the scream had come from. Aaron didn't wait. "Go," he hissed. "Now back the way we came, quiet as you can." They scurried in the opposite direction of the giant's strides, using the moments of its distraction like soldiers crossing a battlefield during shell fire. Behind them, a deep, wet crunch sounded again. Then silence. No more screams. They made it maybe 6 minutes. 6 minutes of stumbling, whispering, hyperventilating, following Aaron's silhouette as he had led them down slope. 6 minutes of boom, boom, of the giant's movement receding behind them. Then, everything went wrong at once. The ground dropped away unexpectedly into a steep ravine, a dry gash in the hillside. Mia, leading now, stepped into empty air and went down hard, sliding on her side in a shower of dirt and rock. She landed in a shallow trench, breath knocked out of her, ankles screaming. Above her, Dev's silhouette appeared, reaching down. I'm okay, she gasped, grabbing at his hand. And then her phone, jolted loose from her pocket, tumbled out beside her. The screen lit up as it hit the ground, bright as a flare in the dark. For half a second, the ravine glowed cold blue-white. The mountain answered. Boom. Not the distant patrol steps now. A new impact, much closer. It wasn't just through the ground. It was in their chests, in their teeth. Jules whispered a wordless curse. Aaron snapped. Phone! Mia scrambled, slapping at the device, but it was already too late. The giant had seen. The next step was close enough that chunks of rock dislodged from the ravine walls. "Run!" Aaron shouted, abandoning the pretense of silence. They bolted along the bottom of the ravine, scrambling over boulders, splashing through a trickle of snowmelt that had no business being as cold as it was. The footsteps followed, faster now. They weren't distant, ponderous booms anymore. They were rapid, hungry impacts. Boom, boom, boom. The ravine curved. They followed it blindly. At one bend, part of the wall had collapsed, forming a rough ramp up to the forest. Aaron veered toward it. They clawed their way up the slope, boots skidding, fingers digging into loose soil. Behind them, the ravine floor exploded in a spray of rock and dirt as something slammed into it. A foot, chopping down like a falling boulder. Mia felt the impact in her bones. She saw in a sick flash how easily that same foot could turn them into red smears on the hillside. She didn't look back. They burst out into the trees again, lunging between trunks, branches tearing at their clothes. The sounds behind them were chaos now. Splintering wood, breaking rock, that horrible sense of something impossibly big forcing itself through a world built for smaller things. The forest thinned. Suddenly, they were spilling out onto a wide, bare slope of scree, loose rocks and gravel sliding downward in unstable sheets. A shadow fell over them. Mia risked a glance back. The giant was half out of the tree line, one leg planted in the ravine they'd just escaped, the other braced on the hillside. Up close, framed against the stars, its scale shattered her sense of reality. Each limb was like a column of interlocking stone, but the way it moved was wrong. Too fluid for rock, too heavy for flesh. It had no clear face, just irregular planes of darkness where features might be, like a statue that had been left unfinished for 1,000 years. Somewhere in that craggy mess, something watched them. It lifted its foot. Aaron shouted, voice splintering with more fear than command this time. "Scatter!" They did. Mia veered left, Jules right. Dev and Aaron straight downhill. The rocks underfoot rolled and clattered, making every step a near fall. The giant stepped down where they'd been. The impact was like a bomb. A wave of loose rock avalanched outward, knocking all of them off their balance. Mia went down hard, sliding, the scree acting like a ball bearing under her body. Dust choked her nose and mouth. She heard someone scream. Dev? Jules? She couldn't tell. The giant took another step, the foot slicing sideways across the slope this time. Not stomping, sweeping, like a child dragging a hand through a sandbox to clear a pattern. Mia saw it coming, the vast wall of rock flesh and pulverizing stone scything towards her. There was nowhere to go. At the last second, she shoved herself sideways, rolling into a shallow depression just as the foot crashed over the spot she'd been. The shock of it sent a spray of gravel over her, burying her legs. Above, someone's voice rose in a strangled cry that cut off mid-breath. When the dust thinned, there was only 3 of them still moving. Dev lay twisted 30 feet downslope, half buried under a fan of rocks, his chest-mounted camera blinking a single red light. Jules was on her hands and knees farther down, coughing, blood streaking one cheek. Aaron was closer, dragging himself upright, one arm hanging limp. Dev didn't move. Mia screamed for him, and then the giant bent down. Its hand descended with horrifying precision, fingers curling around Dev's body in a bunch of sliding scree. It lifted him, limp as a doll, up toward that vague notion of a face. For a heartbeat, Dev's eyes opened. He wasn't looking at the giant. He was looking down at them, the red camera light reflecting in his pupils like some kind of recording demon. Then the hand closed. The sound was wet and short and mercifully drowned out by the roar of shifting stones. The giant tossed what was left of him aside like trash. Jules sobbed. Aaron grabbed her, yanking her toward a line of jagged outcrops protruding from the slope. "Shelter," he gasped. "Now." They dove behind the rocks as the giant's other foot came down again, this time farther uphill, trying to herd them. The pattern was obvious now. Not random stomping, but deliberate herding, like a cat playing with mice, pinning them against terrain they couldn't cross. Ahead of them, the slope dropped abruptly into darkness, some kind of cliff or cut they couldn't see the bottom of. The giant took another step, closing the distance. There was nowhere else to go. Mia pressed her back to the cold stone, chest heaving. Jules was hiccuping sobs, clutching her side. Aaron's eyes darted around, searching for anything, any resource. "Flare," he muttered. "Tell me someone still has a flare." Mia's brain stumbled through the inventory of her pack. "Side pocket," she whispered. "Orange tube, 2 of them." He grabbed it, fingers shaking but deft. His thumb flicked the cap off. The flare hissed as it sparked to life, vomiting red fire and thick white smoke. The giant hesitated. It was too close now, towering over him at the edge of the outcrop. One more step and its foot would simply grind their hiding place into rubble. Aaron stepped out from behind the rocks. For a second, he was just a tiny, defiant shape against an impossible silhouette. He held the flare high. The red light splashed over the giant's lower half, painting the rough surface of its skin in flickering blood color. The heat of the flare seared Aaron's hand, but he didn't drop it. "Hey!" he screamed, voice cracking. "Over here!" The giant turned its not face toward him. The air tasted like copper and old stone. The flare smoke curled upward, seeping into rocks and crevices on the giant's form. Something in it responded. The giant recoiled. Not much, not dramatically, but enough that the foot it had been about to plant shifted backward instead. Aaron saw it. "You don't like that, do you?" he shouted, hysterical laughter bubbling under the words. "Yeah, I didn't like being stepped on either." He ran sideways along the outcrop, away from me and Jules, waving the flare like a madman dragging a comet tail of sparks. The giant followed him. Every step it took was still a threat. Rocks shattered, trees uprooted further down. But its orientation had changed. It was focused on the moving, burning thing, tracking it with slow, terrible pivots. "Aaron!" Mia screamed. "Come back!" He didn't. He couldn't. If he brought that thing back toward them, all of this would be pointless. He vaulted a split in the rock, dropping down onto a lower shelf that stuck out over the dark void below. The drop beneath him was a black maw, maybe 100 feet, maybe more. It didn't matter. The giant loomed over him, one hand lifting, fingers spreading. Aaron looked back over his shoulder, and for a split second locked eyes with Mia. "Get low," he shouted, "and when this goes, run." He turned back to the abyss, raised the flare to his mouth, and took a breath like he was about to dive. Then he hurled it down, out into the dark void below the shelf. The flare traced a blazing arc through the air, shedding sparks. For a moment, the blackness beneath them lit up in pulses. Jagged rock walls, twisted roots, the shadowed suggestion of some old, half-collapsed mine entrance yawning in the cliff face. The flare landed somewhere out of sight and exploded into brighter flame, igniting something dry and old and ready to burn. The world below them bloomed red. Heat rushed upward, a sudden dragon's breath. A column of fire surged up like a living thing, licking the underside of the outcrop. The giant screamed. Not with a mouth, not with sound exactly. The noise was like stone cracking in reverse, like fault lines being torn open. a grinding roar that made Mia's teeth ache. Its lower half, exposed to the blast of heat, reacted horribly. The stone flesh blistered, cracked spider webs up its legs, glowing from within with a dull orange light, as if something inside had been hiding from flame for a very long time and was now being dragged back into it. The giant stumbled. Its foot slipped on the heated scree. One enormous hand shot out, clawing at the cliff face for balance. The rock gave way under its weight. For the first time, Mia saw it fail. The giant toppled sideways, its body striking the slope with force that sent a wave of rock and fire outward. Its head, if that's what it was, caught the edge of the outcrop and shattered, spraying boulders and chunks of debris everywhere. It fell into the burning ravine below, its form cracking and collapsing, dissolving into a cascade of flaming rubble. The scream tapered off into 1,000 little pops and hisses as the rain of molten fragments hit the fire and scattered. What had been a living, impossible thing a moment ago was now just an avalanche on fire. The shockwave slammed into the outcrop, knocking Mia and Jules off their feet. A blast of heat and ash rolled over them, searing exposed skin. When the world steadied, Mia coughed, her eyes streaming, and looked around for Aaron. He was gone. The shelf where he'd stood was cracked and half missing, the edge burned to black. Whatever had happened in those last seconds, whatever last step he'd taken or been forced into, he was now somewhere down there in the inferno with the giant. Jules crawled to Mia, sobbing. "We have to go," she choked. "Mia, we have to go now before that fire comes up here." Because it was. The blaze was climbing, licking its way up cracks, catching dry brush. Sparks flew into the forest above. Mia wanted to stay, to scream, to jump, to not leave yet another person behind. But Aaron had given her a very specific order with his last breath. "When this goes, run." She grabbed Jules' wrist and they ran. By the time dawn lightened the sky over the peaks, the North Spire was wreathed in smoke. Fire crews saw the plume from miles away. Rangers scrambled, radios crackling. The trail closed sign became more than just an excuse for paperwork. It was now a line between chaos and control. They found her 6 hours later. A helicopter spotted movement near the lower section of the main trail. A figure staggering along the switchbacks, clothes shredded, skin covered in soot. When they landed and ran toward her, Mia didn't even try to run anymore. She just sank to her knees. Her voice was gone, scraped raw by smoke and screams. They had to lift her into the helicopter, fingers gentle around bruises she didn't remember getting. Later in the hospital, she told them what happened. At least, she tried. She talked about tremors, about footprints bigger than cars, about a handprint pressed into the side of a mountain like a child's palm in wet cement. She talked about something standing up from the ridge itself. The doctors called it trauma-induced hallucinations amplified by altitude, exhaustion, and shock. They circled possible psychosis on the clipboard. The ranger who took her statement wrote, "Believes in large unknown predator," and underlined the word believes. They logged Mia and her friends as victims of a catastrophic rock slide and subsequent wildfire. 5 went in, 1 came out. That was the story. The unofficial version, the one the rescue teams murmured to each other when the supervisors weren't listening, was a little different, because some of them had seen the handprint too. On the southern face of the ridge where the fire had burned hottest, the rock was freshly cracked and blackened. Trees were gone, soil was peeled back as if by huge scoops. And there, half revealed in the exposed cliff, were shapes. Not fossils, not clearly. But if you stood at the right angle, ignoring the optical illusions of shadow and heat distortion, you could swear you were looking at a fractured skull the size of a cabin, one empty socket glowing faintly with ember light. Beside it, like the last frame of a paused film, a hand was pressed deep into the stone. Each finger as long as a bus, the palm a crater. One ranger, a rookie who made the mistake of saying what everyone else was trying not to think, whispered, "Giants." The others shushed him quickly, eyes flickering to where the incident commander was talking to reporters. "Landslide," one veteran muttered. "Say landslide until you believe it. You want this place to stay open? You want people coming back?" The trail stayed closed. They put up the sign, "Maintenance, danger, do not enter." And at night, when they sat around their own fires, away from recording devices and liability clauses, they mentioned other things. Like how the tremors had continued for a while after the fire was out, fainter, farther away, as if something had been moving deeper into the range, something that had learned, painfully, that fire hurt. Up at the old trailhead, the unofficial warning is still there. Different paper, different marker. People keep replacing it when the wind rips it away. Do not camp above the tree line. They move in the open. Maybe it's a joke now, an in-joke with the locals, a way to spook tourists. Or maybe it's what passes for mercy. Up in the high country, storms still roll in. The mountains still crumble and heal. The fire scar on the North Spire Ridge is fading, scabbed over with new growth. But sometimes from the valley floor, people swear they see things on the skyline. Not always. Not often. Just once in a while when the clouds are moving strange and the light hits just wrong. The mountains look less like rock and more like knees, shoulders, hunchbacks. Like something large is standing very, very still, waiting for the small things below to forget. So, if you ever find yourself up near the range, any range really, and you feel a tremor under your feet that doesn't quite match the wind, and you see a footprint that's too big to laugh off, don't be brave. Don't go just a little higher for the view. Stay in the trees. Stay small. And whatever you do, don't camp where the mountains can see you move. They say you're not supposed to tell skinwalker stories after dark, but most rules get broken for content. Lena Morales was chasing a story when she first heard the word. Not from some ancient book or dusty archive, but from a shaky-voiced caller on her true crime podcast hotline. She was in her one-bedroom apartment, city lights smeared across the window, audio interference humming on her desk. The caller's message was full of static. "You talk about missing people," the woman had whispered. "If you're serious about that, you need to come out here. Sagebrush Highway, mile marker 41. People don't just go missing out here. Something takes them. It sounds like them when it calls your name. Don't pick up if it calls you. Don't answer. Don't." The recording cut out with a long, glitchy squeal. Lena replayed it 3 times. Then she did exactly what any rational, safety-minded adult would do. She grabbed her recorder, texted her brother, and planned a road trip. Eli thought it was the best idea she'd ever had. He was lounging sideways in the passenger seat of her dusty Subaru, boots on the dashboard, camera strap wound around his wrist. The desert unfolded in every direction, pale sand scrub and distant mountains fading into blue. "Missing hikers, weird calls, spooky highway," he said, tapping the back of her seat in rhythm with whatever rock playlist he had queued up. "This is like the perfect Halloween special. You're welcome, future ad revenue." Lena smirked and kept her eyes on the road. "It's August," she said, "and this is not a Halloween special. This is a 3-part investigative series on rural disappearances and law enforcement neglect." The third member of their little expedition sat in the back, headphones halfway off, editing notes in a beat-up spiral notebook. Marco, sound tech, city kid, and the only one with a consistent sense of self-preservation. He leaned forward between the front seats. "I'm just gonna say this once," he said. "Let the record show that I suggested doing a nice, safe Cult in the Suburbs season instead." "You heard the voicemail," Lena said. "She knew details that weren't public, names, dates. And she also said something that sounds like you." Marco shuddered. "If I hear my own voice when we get out there, I'm quitting your show and starting a gardening podcast." The GPS had given up an hour ago. Now they were following handwritten directions the caller had emailed them. A junction, a gas station, a general store, a long stretch of road with nothing but dirt shoulders and the heat shimmering up from the asphalt. And then, finally, the sign. Sagebrush Highway, mile 41. The number was half shot out, rust running down like dried blood. "Charming," Eli murmured, lifting his camera. They found the town another 10 minutes down a cracked side road that looked more like a suggestion than a real turnoff. 3 trailers, one leaning shack that might have once been a store, a scattering of rusted cars, and an old RV with faded flowers painted along the side. The sky was turning the deep, bruised purple of late evening by the time they pulled in. A woman was sitting in a long chair outside the RV, cigarette ember glowing in the dark. A big, elderly dog lay at her feet, patchy fur moving with each slow breath. She watched their car roll up with the flat, unimpressed stare of someone who'd seen too much and didn't expect much from the world anymore. "You Morales?" she called before they could even introduce themselves. Lena blinked. "Yeah, I'm Lena, and this is my brother Eli and my producer Marco." She lifted the recorder instinctively, then thought better of it and let her arm drop. "You must be Rosa." Rosa nodded once. "You parked crooked," she said. "If something comes in the night, you're gonna want to leave fast. You should straighten it out." That was the moment Marco decided he officially hated this trip. By the time they'd unloaded their gear into the smallest trailer, 2 narrow beds, a sagging couch, a kitchenette that smelled like old coffee and dust, the desert was fully dark. Real dark, not city dark. No orange glow on the horizon, no traffic, just the distant ticking of insects and the low hum of wind off the scrublands. They met back at Rosa's RV, where a metal fire pit spat and popped with burning mesquite. The old dog thumped its tail when Lena approached, and then quickly lost interest and went back to staring into the fire like it expected something to crawl out. "You really came," Rosa said, handing Lena a chipped mug of something that smelled like coffee and exhaustion. "Most people hear that voicemail and block the number." "I talk about missing people for a living," Lena said. "If there's something real happening out here, I want it on the record." Rosa gave her a long look. "The record?" she said slowly. "Don't change what happens after dark." Eli lowered himself onto a log near the fire, camera turned off for once. "Can you tell us what you think is happening?" he asked. "We won't record without your permission. This is just background." Rosa took a drag of her cigarette and stared past them out into the dark. "You know how city folks talk about coyotes? Tricksters, thieves, always hungry. They steal your dogs, your chickens, whatever you don't lock down. Now imagine something that learned from the coyotes and then kept going. Something that figured out that the easiest way to get a person to open the door is to have someone they love on the other side of it. We get hikers, folks passing through, end-of-the-line types. They camp where they shouldn't, walk where they shouldn't. In the desert, it listens. It waits. You ever hear a voice calling your name out there? You don't answer. Not once. Not even to tell it to shut up. You hear something that sounds like your friend, your mama, your own self. You walk the other way. Marco swallowed. But what is it? Rosa hesitated. The dog raised its head suddenly, nose testing the air. Different folks have different names. Out here, old-timers call it a skinwalker. Thing that wears you like a coat. Thing that takes your face and your voice and your little laugh. Leaves the rest somewhere the coyotes can't even find. The wind rose again, humming through the scrub like a held-back scream. Lena found her voice. The missing hikers? You think that's what took them? Rosa exhaled smoke and something heavier. I think they answered when they should have kept their mouths shut. And I think you should get what you need for your story in one night and leave fast. Eli chuckled because he always laughed when he was nervous. Well, good thing we've got cameras and mics, right? If anything weird happens, at least it'll make great audio. The dog turned its head, staring at Eli with cloudy eyes. Rosa's voice dropped. That's the problem. It likes attention. They set up their gear just before midnight. The plan was basic. A night walk along the stretch of road where most of the disappearances had started. An on-location intro, some atmospheric soundscapes, then interviews with Rosa and any locals they could wrangle in the morning. Lena clipped a small recorder on her jacket and tapped the mic. Sound check, she said briskly. August 12th, 11:57 p.m., Sagebrush Highway, mile marker 41. Ambient noise test, 3-person crew, no enforcement presence on site. Her breath puffed white in the beam of Eli's flashlight. Come on, we walk to the marker, we walk back. Easy. Marco double-checked his handheld recorder and adjusted his headphones. If I get possessed, I want you to know I better get my own episode, he muttered. The desert swallowed them quickly. Even 30 steps away from Rosa's faint firelight, the trailers looked small and far away, like toys dropped in the sand. The sky was an overturned bowl of stars. The highway stretched out ahead, 2 lines of cracked blacktop vanishing into forever. Their boots crunched on gravel, and for a while, nothing happened. The recording captured only their breathing, the scuff of shoes, and the occasional whispered note from Lena. She pointed out where a hiker's car had been found abandoned, white paint still visible in the dirt, where a shoe had turned up months after, full of grit. Listen to this, she said softly into the mic. Multiple disappearances, same 10-mile stretch of road, no official pattern. Locals talk, but they're written off as superstitious. If you look at the map, it forms almost a straight. Did you hear that? Marco cut in. They all stopped. At first it sounded like the wind pushing through the scrub. Then they heard it again. A whistle. No tune, no rhythm, just 3 rising notes, too precise to be random. Could be the wind, Eli said, though it didn't sound like he believed it. They listened. The desert listened back. Lena. A voice called somewhere off to their left. They all jumped. It sounded exactly like Rosa. Same rasp, same clipped vowels. Lena, you there? Come here a sec. The hair on the back of Lena's neck rose. That sounded close, right? Eli whispered. Marco stared into the dark. Rosa doesn't know we came this way yet, he said. We didn't say. Could be she saw the flashlights, Eli said. Maybe? Lena, the voice called again, slightly higher. Sweetheart, come here. I want to show you something. The recorder picked up the tremor in Lena's exhale. That doesn't sound like how she talks, she said quietly. She doesn't call me sweetheart. Eli called out, Rosa, that you? Silence. Then after a beat, Eli. The voice sounded amused now. Come here, bring your camera, baby boy. Get a good shot. Lena grabbed his arm. She's never called you that. We're going back now. Eli hesitated. Flashlight beam was shaking. Maybe she's messing with us? But his voice had gone thin. The 3 of them stood there in a tight cluster, lights straining against the dark. Okay, Lena said. New plan. We walk back to the trailers. We stay together. If you hear your name, you ignore it. If it sounds like me, ignore it. I promise I will be glued to your side the entire time." Eli opened his mouth, probably to crack a joke, but he didn't get the chance, because the voice called again. And this time, it was Lena's. The recorder caught it in eerie clarity. Her exact tone, the way she said "gotta" when she wasn't thinking about it, even the slightly breathless edge she got when she was excited. Every part of Marco's brain lit up with recognition. For a split second, he actually turned toward the sound, knees bending, muscles preparing to step. Lena tightened her grip on his jacket. "That wasn't me," she said through her teeth. Marco's heart hammered against his ribs. He kept his feet planted. Eli swung his flashlight toward the sound. The beam caught only tangled brush, pale sand, and the suggestion of something low to the ground, too fast to fix on. The light swept over it and it vanished, like turning a page. Dead air hummed in their headphones. "I don't like this," Marco whispered. "We're leaving now," Lena said. They didn't argue. They walked faster, boots stumbling on loose gravel. The trailer's faint lights bobbed in the distance, growing and shrinking with the terrain. The highway felt longer than it had on the way out, as if the road had quietly unspooled more miles when they weren't looking. Behind them, the whistling started again. 3 rising notes, over and over, not quite in rhythm with the wind. Lena, her own voice called, closer. "You're gonna want this audio, come on, don't be scared." "Don't answer it," Lena hissed. A moment later, "Eli." The voice was Marco's now. "Dude, you have to see this, it's like crazy. Come here, bro, hurry." Eli flinched. "It sounds like me when I'm messing around," he said. "When did it hear me long enough to—" He cut off, eyes widening. "The hotline message," Lena said slowly. "Rosa's radio. People talking at the gas station. It's been listening to everyone who comes out here for years." They crested a small rise, and then the lights went out. 1 second the trailers were in front of them, like islands of cheap yellow safety in the dark. The next, everything went black. It was sudden and total, like someone had yanked the sky down over their heads. Eli's flashlight flickered, sputtered, and died. Marco's headphones filled with a high, whining buzz, then static. "Don't stop walking," Lena said, forcing her voice to stay low and even. "We know the direction. Straight ahead." Somewhere in the black, something laughed. It was not any of their voices, it was all of their voices, layered, warped, echoing. "This is Lena Morales," it said in her podcast intro cadence, bringing you the story of what happens when you listen too closely. The words twisted on themselves, stretching too long, syllables bending. "Bringing you the story," it repeated. Bringing you. Marco whimpered. Eli grabbed his arm in the dark. "Lena?" Eli's voice shook. "Please tell me you have a backup flashlight, or a lighter, or literally anything." Her hand fumbled over her pockets. Nothing. And then, soft, almost tender, "Eli," a new voice said. Not hers, not Marco's, not Rosa's. Their mother's. "Mi amor," it crooned from the dark beside them. "What are you doing here? You're gonna catch a cold. Come on, let me see you. I've missed you." Eli froze. It was perfect. The accent, the warmth, the way she always dragged out the me when she was worried. Their mom was 3 states away, probably asleep in front of a late-night drama rerun, and yet... "I know that isn't her," Eli whispered. "I know that." The voice chuckled softly. "Of course it's me," it said, edges sharpening. "You think I don't know my own son? You think I don't remember how you cried when you broke your arm in 5th grade? Or how you didn't tell your sister when your car got towed because you were embarrassed? Eli's throat closed. Don't answer, Lena breathed. He bit down on his tongue so hard he tasted blood. Footsteps crunched behind them. Light flared ahead, sudden and blinding. For a second, Lena thought the trailers had come back to life. But the glow was wrong. Too white. Too clean. It was hovering about 6 feet off the ground, pale as bone. As her eyes adjusted, she realized it was not a light. It was a face. Her own. Pale and hovering in the dark, features assembled from shadow and starlight. The mouth smiled, but the eyes were just black hollows, as if something had borrowed the idea of a human face and forgot to fill in the details. "Hi," it said in her voice. And Marco screamed. The recorder caught the scream, but after that the audio file becomes a mess. Static, snatches of overlapping voices, footsteps that didn't match the rhythm of their steps. If you played it back later, and Lena would over and over, you heard phrases that didn't quite fit together. At the time, though, all they knew was blind panic. They crashed forward in the dark, arms out, hands scraping against invisible things, branches, metal, the rough side of a trailer. The world snapped back with the sudden yellow glare of a porch light. Lena stumbled, caught herself on the steps of their rented trailer, and blinked against the brightness. Behind her, Eli slammed into the door, fumbling for the handle, and Marco nearly took them both down. The light over the door flickered madly but stayed on. Inside, everything was exactly as they left it. Dingy, shabby, smelling of dust and old coffee. Except for one thing. All 3 recorders were already on the table. Lena stared at them. She slowly unclipped the recorder from her own jacket, hands shaking, and looked down. The one on the table was identical. Same chipped corner, same bit of tape over the battery slider, the red light blinking steadily. She said faintly. "I did not put that there." Eli slammed the door and locked it, then shoved a chair under the knob for good measure. "Maybe we dropped them?" Marco said. "Out there, and Rosa, picked them up and brought them in?" "Rosa doesn't have a key," Lena said, "and we locked the door." As if someone summoned her by name, Rosa's voice drifted in through the thin metal wall. "Hey," she called from outside. "You kids okay in there?" They all went silent. The voice was light, familiar, just a woman calling to check on her guests. "Don't answer," Marco mouthed. "I heard screaming," the voice said. "Door stuck? I can help with that, just open up." The old dog barked once, then went eerily quiet. Lena's heart hammered. She stepped closer to the door, keeping her weight light, careful not to creak the floorboards. Rosa's voice spoke again, right on the other side of the metal. "Lena Morales?" it said in a perfect imitation of her podcast tone. "Open the door. Let me in. I'm part of your story now." The doorknob jiggled twice, then it went still. Silence. They waited. Long minutes passed, measured only by the ticking of the clock above the sink and the ragged breathing of 3 people trying very hard not to fall apart. At some point, they passed the threshold where terror peaks and then just sits there, heavy and vibrating like a wire drawn too tight. Eventually, Eli slid down the wall and sat on the floor, knees pulled up. We can't stay in here forever. What if it, waits till we sleep?" Lena stared at the recorders. The one on the table was still blinking. "Give me your headphones," she said to Marco. "What?" "Give me your headphones." She plugged them into the recorder on the table, took a breath and hit stop, then rewind, then play. At first, she heard exactly what she expected. Their walk down the road, the whistling, the voices calling their names, her own commands to turn back, and then the audio jumped. Something hissed like tape catching. New file, timestamp, 3 hours before they'd even arrived. She heard the creak of the trailer door, footsteps inside, and a low chuckle. Then, chillingly clear, "This is Lena Morales," her own voice said. "Out in the quiet, where no one's really listening. If you hear this, that means I let it in." "What is it?" Marco whispered, and she didn't answer. Lena slowly took the headphones off and placed them on the table as if they might explode. "Guys, it knew about us before we even got here. It's been listening to the show." Eli stared. "Can it travel through recordings?" Her gaze landed on the other recorder, the one in her hand. A terrible idea formed, reckless, possibly suicidal. "Lena," Marco said, reading her face, "whatever you're about to suggest, I hate it." "We called it with intention," she slowly said. "With stories, with recordings. Maybe we can trap it the same way." "That's not a plan. That's a vibe," Eli said. "Got a better one?" She shot back. He didn't. The rules, as far as they understood them, were simple. Don't answer if it calls your name. Don't follow voices into the dark. Don't invite it in. They had already broken all three. So Lena did what she always did when the story tilted sideways. She wrote a new rule. She set the recorder in the middle of the table, pressed record, and leaned into the mic. "Okay," she said. "You wanted attention? You've got it. This is Lena Morales, and this is a message for whatever's out there listening on the wires. You've been using us like a radio tower, riding along our stories. So here's a new one, just for you. Once upon a time, there was a thing that needed people to look at it to be real, to be strong, to wear their faces. It gorged on their fears, their curiosity, their late-night binge listening. But one day, someone told its story differently. They talked about it like it was already over, like it was an old superstition fading away. Just a cautionary tale about not staring too long into the dark, not listening too hard when something calls you the way you want to be called. Stories can trap things. They can hold them still, pin them down on the page. So here's how this one ends. Whatever you are out there, whatever you've done, the world forgets you. The highway goes quiet, the missing get their own names back, and you become just another thing people talk about around a campfire. No more wires, no more recordings, no more invitations. The light above the table flickered wildly. Somewhere outside, something slammed into the side of the trailer hard enough to rattle the cabinets. The old dog barked again, high, panicked, then cut off with a sharp yelp. Eli flinched. "Lena," he whispered. "Stop, please." "One more thing," she said to the recorder. "Every story needs a rule, so here's yours. You can't cross this line." She scraped a rough circle in the dust on the table around the recorder with her thumbnail. A small, ridiculous gesture, half remembered from childhood games. "But you can stay in here," she murmured. "Locked in this story, locked in this file. Every time someone plays it, they'll just hear the ending. Not you, just me, and me telling you no." The temperature dropped sharply, their breath fogged. The trailer vibrated with another impact, then another, as if something was circling looking for a seam. The lights blew out, plunging them into darkness. The recorder's tiny red LED burned like an eye. For a second, there was a sound like 1,000 voices inhaling at once. Then, a click. The red light went still. Silence. Real silence. No whispers, no voices, no whistling. Outside, the wind dropped. In the distance, a dog began to bark again, ordinary and annoyed. The overhead light flickered back to life. They didn't sleep. They sat there until dawn, backs against the wall, eyes fixed on the recorder as if it might sprout legs and walk. When the sky finally lightened to a pale gray, they cracked the door and stepped outside. Rosa was sitting by the fire pit, cigar in hand, dog snoring at her feet. She looked up as if nothing had happened. "You look like hell," she observed. "Thanks," Eli croaked. You, hear anything last night?" "Like what?" she asked mildly. "Like us screaming," Marco said. "Something banging on the trailer? You calling our names?" Rosa squinted at them. "I was sleeping. Dog didn't make a peep all night. You kids get into whiskey or something?" They exchanged glances. Lena turned slowly in a circle, scanning the sand around the trailer. No strange tracks, no claw marks, no sign of impact on the trailer's thin skin. The door hung straight on its hinges. Everything was boringly, offensively normal. Except, at the edge of the packed dirt near the start of the road, something glinted. She walked over. A mile marker lay half buried in the dust, metal dented but legible. Sagebrush Highway, mile 41. A long pale scratch ran through the one, as if something had dragged a claw across it on its way out. Or in. Lena looked back at the trailer, at the recorder on the table inside, still where she'd left it. She had no proof, nothing she could take to an editor, nothing she could present as more than a fever dream brought on by desert air and scary stories. But when she picked up the recorder and hit play, all it gave her was her own voice. No layered voices, no taunts, no laughter. Just her, just the ending. They left before noon. Rosa waved from her lawn chair, dog panting beside her. "You got what you came for?" she called. "Yeah, I think we did," Lena said. "Good. Some stories, you only get to tell once." They drove back toward the city in mostly silence, the desert unspooling behind them. At some point, Eli said, "So, we're not actually going to publish that recording, right?" Lena just watched the road. "If we do," she said slowly, "we do it careful. No names for the place, no directions, no hotline number, and we don't air the part that called to it. Just the warning." Marco huffed out a laugh. "A podcast episode about nothing listening," he said. "That'll go over great. People will listen. They always do. Late at night in the dark." She glanced at the recorder resting in its padded case. "And I'll tell them. If you hear a name in the static, if you hear a voice that sounds just a little too much like your own, you hit stop, you walk away, and you don't give it what it wants." The highway stretched ahead, long and straight. In the side mirror for just a heartbeat, she thought she saw something standing at the edge of the road where the asphalt turned back to dirt. Tall, thin, head crooked as if listening. Then the angle shifted, sun hitting the glass, and it was gone. She kept driving. So, if you're hearing this now, Lena's voice, the hum of the line, the little hitch in her breath, you might be wondering, was any of it real? Did the skinwalker learn her name through the wire? Did it wear her voice like a coat and stand outside the trailer door, smiling with a face that wasn't finished? Or was it just three tired people in a lonely place, spooking themselves with their own echoes? Maybe it doesn't matter, because one last rule came out of that night in the desert. Some stories are safest told in the daylight, and if you ever hear your own voice calling you from the dark, you don't answer. You know that sick feeling you get when you realize the camera is pointed right at you? Ethan spent months with that feeling pointed in the opposite direction. He told himself it was just the job. Nights in a windowless room, 72 screens stacked in a curved wall in front of him like a low-budget version of NASA. Each one showed some part of the interstate system in his state. On-ramps, exits, long dead stretches of blacktop with white lane stripes fading into the distance. He monitored traffic flow. That was the official line anyway. Unofficially, his job was to stare at live feeds and wait for something terrible to happen. Crashes, pile-ups, jackknife semis, the kind of things you never want to see in real life, let alone in high-definition night vision while sipping stale coffee in a room that smelled like dust. By the time this story starts, Ethan had seen it all. Or he thought he had. The Highway Operations Center was on the edge of town, a squat concrete bunker with no windows and too much air conditioning. The front lobby had a cheerful poster that showed cartoon cars smiling under the words, "Safety starts with seeing it first." It felt less like a slogan and more like a threat. Inside, behind a locked badge door, past humming server stacks and buzzing fluorescent lights, was the monitoring room. That's where Ethan sat every night from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., surrounded by a glow of screens showing empty roads. He tried not to think about how many people died on those roads each year. He tried not to think about how many of them he'd watched. "You're getting the easy shift," his supervisor, Ron, had said when he first got hired. "Nights are dead, just keep an eye on the board. If you see smoke, sparks, stopped vehicles, radio it in. You don't need to be a hero, just be awake." The board was divided into grids. 6 rows of 12 screens. Each digital eye looked out from some pole or gantry over the highway. At the bottom left, row 6, column 4, there was a feed labeled Cam 6-4, exit 23 eastbound. Ethan didn't notice that one his first week. He didn't notice it his second. By the third week, he would know that screen like his own reflection. The first time he saw it, he barely registered it. It was 2:17 a.m. on Tuesday, one of those weeknights that feel like they're not attached to any real day, just gray time smeared between midnight and dawn. He sat hunched over his station, sipping lukewarm coffee, tabbing through the AI alerts that flagged unusual events on the interstate. A deer on the shoulder here, stalled vehicle there, nothing urgent. On the main wall, the screens cycled through auto-zoom events whenever the system thought something needed a closer look. A red border would appear around the feed. The camera would zoom in, and a little notification would pop up in the corner of Ethan's control panel. A chime sounded, soft, one note. Unidentified object Cam 6-4. Ethan frowned and tapped the notification. The screen for Cam 6-4 exit 23 eastbound flashed red, then zoomed in on the highway shoulder. He'd seen exit 23 before in passing, a rural off-ramp, a lonely arc of asphalt curving away from the interstate into darkness. There was a blue service sign that promised gas, food, and lodging, though you could never see the actual town from the camera, just the trees and a long empty stretch of road. Now the camera zoomed tight on the shoulder at the base of the ramp. Something stood there. For a moment, Ethan thought it was a person. It stood upright about 6 feet tall. That was as much as he could tell. The night vision rendering turned everything into shades of white, gray, and black. The figure was wrong though, too narrow, like someone had taken a person and squeezed them, stretched them, and thinned them out. It stood perfectly still, facing the road. No car lights on the horizon, no movement. Just this thin, pale, vertical smear of something. "What the hell?" Ethan whispered. He called up the camera controls and tried to focus. The feed sharpened a little. The figure became more defined, but not in a way that made sense. Its edges wavered like it wasn't entirely there. The shapes made his eyes itch. Then, as the camera auto-adjusted, the figure's head moved. It turned. There was no face, not really. Just a hint of where one should be, a slightly darker oval atop the length of its body. Ethan had the sudden, sharp, irrational certainty that this thing was looking right into the camera. After 3 seconds, the alert timed out. The red border vanished. The camera zipped back to its standard wide view, showing the exit ramp and stretch of interstate. The figure was gone. Ethan sat there with his hand frozen on the mouse, the hairs on his arms standing up. The system marked the alert as resolved. He didn't. "Hey Ron," Ethan asked during a shift change the next morning. "You ever get weird false positives on cam 6-4 exit 23? Ron yawned, handing over the key card for the equipment locker. "Exit 23? He scratched at his thinning hairline. "That's the one by Hollow Creek, yeah? The AI flags that one sometimes. Deer, I think, or fog. Why?" Ethan hesitated. He didn't want to sound crazy 3 weeks into a job he kinda needed. "Yeah, just got an anomaly there last night," he said. "Looked like, I don't know, some kind of artifact. Didn't look like a deer." Ron shrugged. "Cameras get weird sometimes, especially the older ones. You can log it if it bugs you, but if there wasn't a wreck, it's not our problem." That's the thing. There hadn't been a wreck. No car, no smoke, no movement. Just that thin, still figure. When he got home, after a shower that went from hot to scalding because he couldn't stop thinking about that blank oval where a face should be, he pulled out his phone and searched. Exit 23 Hollow Creek accident. There were a couple of minor incidents from over the years. One fatality from a drunk driving crash. Nothing recent, nothing unusual. No mention of strange people on the shoulder in the middle of the night. He told himself it was a glitch. He believed that until Thursday. Thursday, 3:09 a.m. It was another dead night. Traffic icons on the digital map crawled lazily along. An occasional semi, a long-haul trucker numb to the world. Headlights flared and receded. Ethan watched the board with half of his attention. The rest of his brain floated somewhere between boredom and the first phases of sleep deprivation hallucinations. The chime sounded again. Unidentified object, cam 6-4. He snapped awake. The camera on exit 23 zoomed in, frame tightening on the shoulder. There it was. Same place, same stance. The figure on the shoulder looked exactly as it had on Tuesday. Tall, too thin, washed out in grayscale. Only this time, the camera feed didn't wobble or artifact. The image was crisp. No wind moved its clothes, if those were clothes. The edges of it were sharper now, the outline more distinct. It almost looked like it was wearing something like a coat, but the proportions were off. Its arms hung too low, or maybe there were too many joints. The night vision made it hard to tell. Ethan's fingers hovered over the zoom controls. His throat went dry. He zoomed in further. The figure's head jerked a few degrees, that featureless face turning toward the camera again. The system had no sound, but Ethan heard a phantom crack in his ears, like something had snapped too quickly. He leaned closer to the monitor. At maximum zoom, the screen was almost static in gray blur, the shape resolving into something the human eye wasn't meant to interpret. The face was just smooth darkness. Then the pixels shimmered. A pattern crawled across the blank oval like a ripple of static. 2 darker pits opened where eyes should be. Not full eyes, not human, just the suggestion of them. Ethan had seen the effect before on cheap horror videos. Faces blurred for privacy, features smeared out. This was like the inverse, the camera trying its hardest, finding a face where there shouldn't be one. The AI alert timer ticked down in the corner of the screen. 10, 9, 8. "Come on," Ethan whispered. "Do something." The figure obliged. Its arms rose in a single smooth motion, as if pulled by a string. The hand, if that's what it was, unfolded into 2 long fingers and bent into a slow, deliberate angle. It waved at the camera. The AI alert chimed softly as it resolved and minimized itself, the camera snapping back to wide view so fast it startled Ethan. He scrambled to pull up the saved clip. The system auto-recorded anomalies. He loaded the last one into the review window and hit play. The feed played back at normal speed. Gray shoulder, empty road. No figure, no movement, no wave. The log simply showed 10 seconds of perfectly normal stretch of asphalt and nothing else. The system had flagged unidentified object, but the recording was clean. Like whatever had been standing there wasn't interested in being replayed. After his shift, he cornered Ron before the guy could leave. "There's something wrong with Cam 6-4, Ethan said. It keeps flagging anomalies, but the recordings are empty. No animals, no debris. It triggered twice this week." Ron blinked slowly. He looked like a man who'd already checked out of consciousness. "Yeah, it does that sometimes," he said. "We think the AI is glitchy with older hardware. That one's overdue for a maintenance swap. Put in a ticket if it's really bugging you." Ethan's jaw clenched. "The live feed isn't glitchy. I'm seeing..." He stopped himself. "I'm seeing something that doesn't show in the recording." Ron sighed and rubbed his face. "Look," he said, lowering his voice as he glanced around the empty room. "You've been here, what, 3 weeks? The night shift gets into your head. These cameras stare back after a while. You start seeing ghosts and static. Trees look like people. Reflections look like faces. It's just your brain trying to entertain itself." "This is not that," Ethan said quietly. Ron put a hand on his shoulder. It felt heavy, like an anchor. "If there's no wreck and nothing on the recording," he said, "then as far as the system is concerned, there's nothing there. Don't start spooking yourself. We had a guy quit last year because he thought one of the rest stop bathrooms was haunted. You don't want to be that guy." He left it there. Ethan didn't. He went home exhausted, lay in bed and watched the fuzzy shapes on his popcorn ceiling until they all looked like that faceless oval turned up at him. By Sunday, he'd almost convinced himself it was a trick of the eye. He drank less coffee, tried to keep his thoughts grounded. He forced himself to narrate what he was seeing on the feeds in boring, procedural language. "Vehicle stopped on shoulder. Possible flat," he murmured. "Fog bank rolling in from north. Minor visibility obstruction." It helped. It made the weird, liminal feeling of the highway seem manageable. Label it, log it, move on. He avoided looking directly at Cam 6-4. But the system didn't care where he looked. At 3:01 a.m., the chime sounded again. Unidentified object, Cam 6-4. His chest tightened. He could ignore it, he told himself. The AI would flag it, auto-log it, and move on. Ron wasn't watching. No one would know. The chime sounded again. Once for the anomaly, once for a new incoming tag. The second notification popped up in the corner of his console labeled AI Pattern Note, Reoccurring Subject, Exit 23 Eastbound. He swore under his breath and clicked. The feed on Exit 23 zoomed in. The shoulder was empty. No tall, thin shape, no faceless head. Just the faded white line of the edge of the road, a gravel shoulder, and the looming presence of trees. "Okay," Ethan said. "Okay, see? Nothing. This is fine." Then something stepped out of the tree line. It didn't move like a person. People put weight into their steps. Their sway, bounce, natural imbalance. This thing glided. One moment the space between two trees was empty. The next, that narrow silhouette slid out of the darkness as if it had been painted there, and the entire background had shifted. It stopped on the shoulder, perfectly aligned with the place it had been standing the other nights. It turned toward the road, then slowly toward the camera. The system, apparently satisfied it had identified the object, let the alert timer count down without doing anything else. Ethan leaned closer, knuckles white. As the figure faced the camera, the night vision struggled to process it. Its edges flickered. Its proportions seemed to stretch and compress by a few pixels, like reality itself couldn't settle on what it was. The suggestion of a face darkened. This time, it didn't wave. It raised both arms. The movement was too smooth, like someone dragging a slider up. The thin arms reached toward the camera, hands curling slightly as if feeling along an invisible surface. The air conditioning hummed. Somewhere in the building, a compressor kicked on with a thunk. Ethan barely noticed. The figure's hands pressed against the lens. It was impossible. The camera was mounted 30 feet up on a metal pole looking down at the highway. There was no way for anything human to just stand on the shoulder and reach out like that. But in the feed, those long, pale fingers spread against the image plane, distorting the picture around each digit as if they were pressing on plastic wrap. The AI alert timer hit 0. The red border blinked away. The camera did not zoom out. The feed froze with those hands still pressing against it. Then, in the corner of the screen, a new overlay appeared. A tiny icon he'd never noticed before. Live link requested, source unknown. The icon pulsed like a heartbeat. Something else happened then. Something Ethan only realized in hindsight. As he stared at the screen, he became aware of the room behind him. Not in a normal way, not with his ears or his eyes. It was a prickling on the back of his neck, the sense of space. That feeling you get when you know somebody is standing behind you. He swallowed. "Ron?" he said, even though he knew Ron wasn't there. No answer. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the screen. The pulsing icon blinked faster, and then steadied. The image flickered, and the hands on the lens weren't on highway camera anymore. They were on a different feed entirely. The monitoring room's main display showed all 72 cameras at once. Ethan's control allowed him to select any of them, enlarging one feed in the center while keeping the others as thumbnails. Cam 6-4 was still labeled as Exit 23, but the background behind those pale hands had changed. Instead of a highway shoulder, Ethan saw the reflection of a room. His room. The monitoring room. It was distorted, a bit like a fisheye lens, but he recognized it immediately. The curved wall of screens, the row of empty workstations, the glowing exit sign over the door. The hands on the glass were enormous now, pressed against the inside of that view, fingers splayed wide. The angle was wrong. It wasn't from the vantage point of any security camera he knew about. It was as if the image were being taken from somewhere just a few feet behind him, looking past his shoulder toward the screens. Except in that distorted reflection, Ethan wasn't there. The chair where he sat in real life was empty. He stared, heart hammering. The pulsing icon changed again. Live link established. The hands slid aside. Something leaned closer. For a moment, the face filled the feed. It was still mostly a smear, too dark, too smooth. But the night vision filter tried its best. Pixels crawled into shapes it thought it should use. A curve that might be a mouth, empty pits where eyes should be. Ethan's spine locked up. In the warped greenish reflection, he saw the room behind him. He saw the door. He saw the faint, pale suggestion of a tall, thin shape standing inside that doorway. Not on the screen, in the reflection. In here, with him. His hands went numb. The edges of his vision closed in like a tunnel. He did the only thing his adrenaline-soaked brain could think of. He killed the power. He slammed his palm onto the emergency shutoff button under the control desk, the one Ron had pointed out during training. If everything goes to hell, Ron had said, and the system locks up where the feeds start looping, hit this. It cuts power to the monitors and resets the server link. We'll lose a few minutes of data, but it's safer than staring at bad info during an actual emergency. The monitoring room went instantly dark. The screens flashed to black. The hum of the cameras cut. The only light came from the emergency exit sign and the faint glow of a floor lamp in the corner. There was no mechanical sound from the door, no footsteps, no rustle of clothing. Just the sudden, deafening absence of that constant electronic whisper from 72 live feeds. For several long seconds, Ethan sat frozen in the dark, listening to his own heartbeat hammering in his ears. Nothing moved. Finally, shaking, he fumbled for his phone, using the screen's glow to orient himself. He aimed it at the far wall where the door should be. The doorway was empty. No tall, thin figure, no blank, waiting face. Just a door with a little wired glass window, showing the dimly lit hallway beyond. He laughed then. It came out high and breathless. "Sleep deprivation," he said aloud. "That's all. I'm freaking myself out. Ron was right." He waited for his breathing to slow, then reset the power. The systems rebooted, one by one. The screens flickered, then filled the familiar grid of roads and ramps and empty night. Cam 6-4 came back online. Exit 23 looked like any other lonely stretch of highway. No figure on the shoulder, no hands on the lens, no live link request icon, just the road disappearing into darkness. He did not log the event. What would he even write? Camera briefly turned my live feed into a funhouse mirror that showed a tall, faceless nightmare behind me? He marked it as a malfunction and left it there. But he knew, in the quiet places of his mind that wouldn't stop replaying that warped reflection, that he hadn't imagined it. You don't hallucinate specific camera overlay icons you've never even seen before. He thought about quitting. He drafted an email to HR 3 times, never sending it. Rent was due, jobs were scarce, and a part of him, a small, stupid, curious part, wanted to know what the hell Exit 23 was. For the next few nights, he watched the board like a hawk. Sometimes he thought he saw something at the edge of Cam 6-4's frame, a flicker in the tree line, a subtle shift in the shadows. But the AI didn't flag anything, and he didn't manually zoom. He avoided the zoom button like it was a detonator. He told himself if the system flagged Exit 23 again, he'd pull the plug and walk. Just leave the building and never come back. That resolve lasted until the system beeped for a different reason. 2 weeks later, the AI flagged an actual wreck on Exit 23. It was a little after midnight on Saturday. Traffic was heavier than usual. Bar crowds, weekend trips. A red alert popped up on Ethan's console. Sudden deceleration event, Cam 6-4, Exit 23 eastbound. He clicked it before he could think. The camera on Exit 23 zoomed in on the ramp. A dark sedan lay crumpled against the guardrail, front end smashed in. One wheel spun lazily in the air, still trying to turn. Skid marks marred the asphalt behind it. Steam billowed from under the hood. The AI immediately pinged the highway patrol and local EMS, sending coordinates and a short automated description. Ethan grabbed the radio and relayed additional details. Single vehicle crash, Exit 23 eastbound, sedan versus guardrail. Unknown occupants, no visible fire yet, but there's steam, possible fuel leak. As he spoke, a figure stumbled into frame. A man in his 30s, maybe wearing a button-up shirt and jeans. His face was smeared with blood. He staggered away from the driver's side door, dazed, one hand pressed to his head. Another shape slumped in the passenger seat, motionless. 2 occupants, Ethan added quickly. Passenger appears unresponsive. He watched, helpless, as the driver turned in a slow circle on the shoulder, looking down the ramp as if expecting someone to be there. No cars approached. Traffic on the main interstate flowed past, oblivious. The man swayed, took a couple of unsteady steps down the ramp, and then stopped. He looked toward the tree line. The camera auto-adjusted the focus. Between 2 trees, partially obscured by branches, something tall and thin stood very, very still. Ethan's breath hitched. The driver seemed to see it too. He staggered backwards, eyes wide, lips moving. The camera was too far to read what he was saying, but his body language screamed one word. No. He turned and ran back toward the car, slipping once on the gravel. He yanked open the car door, tried to pull out the unconscious passenger. He wasn't fast enough. The tall shape stepped out of the trees, gliding toward the shoulder. The AI did not flag it. No unidentified object chime. No red border. Just the cold, steady gaze of the camera watching an accident scene. The figure stopped at the edge of the shoulder. The driver froze, still half inside the car. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the tall thing raised one arm and pointed down the ramp, away from the interstate, away from help. The driver straightened slowly, like something was pulling him upright by invisible strings. He turned. Ethan wanted to shout, to pound on the glass, to do anything to break whatever awful line had formed between the dazed man and that faceless thing. But all he could do was watch. The driver left the passenger in the car and began walking down the ramp. Not stumbling, not running, just walking, steady and calm as if he were following someone home. He walked past the tall figure. The camera swung slightly to track him as he disappeared down the ramp off into the darkness. The tall shape did not follow. It turned, instead, to face the camera. Ethan slapped the power button again. The room went dark. His heart pounded in his throat. This time, he didn't wait for the reboot. He grabbed his bag and left the monitoring room, ignoring the protest of systems midway through reboot sequences. In the hall, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was the emergency line. He almost didn't answer. Operations, he managed, voice cracking. A trooper's voice came through, tinny and strained. This is Highway Patrol Unit 4-7. We're on scene at exit 23. Crash with injuries. Ethan swallowed hard. Copy that. We saw the impact on Cam 6-4. Do you need additional EMS? There was a pause. We've got one DOA in the passenger seat, the trooper said. Looks like head trauma from the collision. We're searching for a second occupant. Driver's side door is open. Blood trail leads down the ramp, but... He trailed off. But what? Ethan whispered. But the trail just stops, the trooper said. Halfway down, no footprints past that point. No tire marks, no sign he left the shoulder. It's like he just vanished. Ethan did not sleep that day. He called in sick that night. Ron didn't sound surprised. Take a day, he said. You've been looking rough. Night shift chews people up. I'll get Rick to cover you. Ethan listened to podcasts, played mindless video games, anything to keep his thoughts away from exit 23. It worked until about 2 a.m. when his phone buzzed again. Unknown number. He almost let it go to voicemail, but something in him, some awful, clawing curiosity, made him swipe to answer. Hello? Static hissed on the line for a moment, then a voice, thin and distant, like it was speaking from the far end of a tunnel. Is this Ethan? His stomach dropped. Who is this? Ethan said. A faint sound on the line, not quite a laugh, not quite a sob. It wavered. I'm sorry, the voice said. I can't find the road back. He knew that tone, that dazed, drifting quality. It was the driver from exit 23. He'd never heard the man's voice, but he knew. Deep down in the place where instinct lives, he knew. I'm going to hang up and call the police, Ethan said. They're looking for you. Just stay where you are. I tried, the man whispered. I followed it. I keep walking. The road changed. It's like the cameras, you know, different angles. I think it's using them. Using you. Ethan's mouth went dry. What do you mean, using me? "You see it," the man said. "You keep looking. It likes that. It knows your eyes. It learned your name when you wrote it." "When I wrote it?" His first week on the job, filling out the training forms, signing the incident log on a slow night just to show he knew how. Cam 6-4, exit 23, no incidents, monitored by Ethan Marsh. The man's voice faded in and out under waves of static. "I thought it was just standing there," he said, "just watching. But it's not. It's connected, 24/7. All those cameras, all those roads. It's not stuck on the ramp. The roads are stuck on it." The static surged. "Where are you?" Ethan asked. "Tell me what you see." "White lines," the man said. "Always white lines. They keep rearranging. Shoulders where there shouldn't be. Exits that go nowhere. And it's in all of them. If I look at it too long, I start seeing myself." His voice broke into a ragged laugh. "Tell them I'm sorry," he said. "Tell them I tried to come back." The line went dead. Ethan stared at his phone screen, hand shaking. He called the highway patrol anyway, explained as calmly as he could that he'd just received a call from someone claiming to be the missing driver from exit 23. They traced the number, and it was registered to the driver. The call pinged a cell tower approximately 20 miles from the crash site, in the opposite direction of the trail that had just stopped. A trooper drove out there. There was no sign of the man, no abandoned car, no footprints, nothing. The driver was listed as missing. Ethan went back to work 2 nights later. He tried to refuse, but bills don't care about tall highway entities, and neither does HR. He told himself he wouldn't look at Cam 6-4. He lasted until 1:43 a.m. He didn't get a chime, no AI alert, no red border. He just looked. The exit 23 feed showed its usual view: the ramp, the shoulder, the trees, and something else. At maximum zoom near the base of the exit sign, someone had scratched something into the metal with what looked like a key or a knife. The night vision filter made it grainy, but the letters were clear enough. 4 words. "Stop watching. It sees." The AI hadn't flagged that either. He stared at those words for a very long time. The longer he watched, the more he became aware of the other feeds. The whole wall of screens, dozens of cameras, all pointed out at the world. He noticed odd little things he hadn't before. A patch of night that seemed too dark on Cam 3-9, even with the infrared. A smear of static that lingered a frame too long on Cam 2-11. A reflection in the glass of a bus stop on Cam 4-2 that looked, just for a moment, like a tall, thin shape standing where no one should be standing at 3 a.m. He blinked, and it was gone. Somewhere deep in the system, an invisible input clicked into place. AI pattern note updated. Subject recognized. He hadn't clicked anything. On Cam 6-4 at the tree line, something shifted. It didn't come fully into view. Just a hint of verticality. A darker shadow within the shadows. A suggestion of long, patient waiting. Ethan reached for the power button again. His hand stopped halfway. Because he finally understood something the missing driver had tried to tell him. It wasn't about exit 23. Exit 23 was just where he'd first noticed it. Whatever this was, it wasn't stuck in the world the way people were. It lived in the lenses, in the unblinking eyes watching the roads, in the endless stream of data always flowing, always being recorded, always being reviewed by someone like Ethan. If he turned off the screens, it wouldn't vanish. It would just move. To traffic cameras, to doorbell cams, to baby monitors, to the little black hole in the top of his phone, staring up at his face as he leaned over in the dark. The thought wound around his spine like barbed wire. He left the system on. He did his job until the end of his shift, his eyes sore and burning, heart pounding. He went home as the sun came up, the sky turning from black to gray to the washed-out blue of an exhausted morning. He turned his phone face down on the table. He covered the tiny pinhole in his laptop camera with a sticker. He told himself that would help. It didn't. Because the thing about cameras is this: they don't need to be pointed at you to matter. Sometimes just knowing they're there is enough. Sometimes all it takes to invite something in is attention. You are the one staring into the dark grain of a screen right now, imagining a lonely stretch of highway and a thin, patient shape standing on the shoulder. You are the one supplying the eyes. Somewhere out there, in the ghost-like green of night vision, something turns toward a lens you can't see and raises one too long hand. It waves, not at the camera, at whoever might be watching, and whoever might, just for a second, forget that the road only goes one way. If you ever find yourself driving late at night and you see a sign for exit 23, any exit 23, do yourself a favor. Keep going. Don't look at the shoulder. And if your phone buzzes with an unknown number and a voicemail full of static, don't hit play. Some of us learned the hard way that what you watch eventually starts watching back. And some exits, you don't come back from those. Thanks for wandering the dark with me tonight. You're my kind of night owl. If this story gave you chills, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe to Midnight Delight for more tales that watch you back. Have a good night's sleep, if you still can.